Hi, everybody. I'm back. I'm going to do the best I can with this today. I actually just recorded most of this episode and then realized that my sound was terrible. It was using the wrong mic. So I decided to re-record it because you would not have been able to hear me very well at all. On top of that, I'm recording this very late because I had my power go out this morning, only for a few hours. And then after that, my internet went out mid-morning and didn't come back on until mid-afternoon. So it's been kind of a day when it comes to the utilities and the electronics of it all. And also, I want to apologize for being gone so long. Some time ago, it's probably been 8 weeks, 12 weeks, something like that I did my last Ask videos. I did that fully intending to get back into it and be doing videos every week, but life happens. I've been insanely busy and just no time for anything lately. It is getting better. I'm going to probably continue to be busy for the next month or two, but despite that, I'm hoping to be able to show up a little bit more often. I'm going to try to do analysis videos for Dead City, which dropped its first episode of season 2 today. And then I will get to your asks and do those as well, so I can get caught up. So I apologize for being gone so long. I'm glad to be back. I'm really glad to have new Walking Dead stuff to analyze. Feels like it's been a long time since the last thing we had, which was Daryl Dixon season 2. I will say, though, that I'm not going to really go all out on Dead City because I'll do the videos, but I'm probably not going to do all of the pictures, and, it's not going to be as detailed as Daryl Dixon. There's a few reasons for that. One, Dead City isn't my favorite spinoff. I do like it. I enjoy watching it, and there is some TD symbolism in it, so I'm very excited for that. But I don't like it nearly as much as Daryl Dixon and even The Ones Who Live, so there's that. And then it tends to not be as heavy on the TD symbolism. I usually do see some symbolism, but it's just not as much. So just be patient with me, and I will get these videos out. But just don't expect quite as much as when Daryl Dixon is on, and I'll probably do a lot more once we get season 3, which will probably be in the fall. Okay, so for today, I'm just going to go through my notes chronologically and tell you what I saw in the first episode. So before we get into it, there will be spoilers for Dead City episode 201, first episode of second season. So if you haven't watched yet, make sure and watch first and then come back and watch this. All right, let's jump into it. So first of all, we see them picking up Walker bodies with their truck, and the methane, the way that they're creating methane with the Walker bodies is still going on, and it looks like it's going to be a huge focus for season 2. We see Hershel and Maggie together. Now, I really liked this first scene with them for a couple of reasons. Number one was the Beth symbolism, of course, but I also just liked that Hershel smiled at Maggie a few times, and they seemed to be a little bit closer than they were last season. Last season, we saw that their relationship was really, really strained, and they just didn't seem to actually like each other or get along that much, and that's rough to watch. You want them to be close. And here it seems like it's a little bit better. Like they're spending time together, they're a little more comfortable with each other, and I enjoyed that. Now, once we got past the scene, they went into his room, and then we could see that there still is a lot of awkwardness there and a lot of silence between them. So it's not 100% better, but it's better than it was last season. In this first scene, though, where she is teaching him to throw the knife and he throws it but misses, okay, there's a few different ways I could go with this. The first is just the deer, right? There's a deer symbol. And originally, I was thinking, okay, people always ask me this because I always say that when the deer lives, the person dies, and when the deer dies, the person lives, right? And we saw him miss the deer, so I was going, okay, I'm going to have to watch and find out what happens with this deer, because if the deer lives, it suggests that a character should die somewhere. But that didn't end up being the case, because in the next scene, when they get back to the community, they have the dead deer in the wagon. So it's just a matter of Hershel missed with his knife. It's just a way of showing that he's not quite where he needs to be yet with his skills. But I'm assuming that after that they kept hunting it, and maybe Maggie took it down or something. But they did bring the deer back. The deer was dead, so we're good on the symbolism there. That means that no humans have to die. But the bigger thing here was that Maggie teaching Hershel how to use a knife and throw it, it just felt very much like Daryl teaching Beth to use the crossbow. I mean, even the way they were standing, like the way they were spatially situated. We had Maggie at Hershel's shoulder, just kind of watching what he's doing and giving him pointers. And that's exactly what Daryl was doing with Beth in Alone, excuse me. So it really felt that way. And, I definitely talked about this last season, but Hershel has a lot of Beth in him, okay, mostly because he's artistic. It's a different kind of art. She sang and he draws, but even so, he's got that artsy right brain thing. And the thing about Maggie is that she's just very, very, she's like the polar opposite of Beth, which isn't a bad thing. It's just different personalities. Maggie is very left brained. She's very logical. She's very in the 3D, in the masculine a lot. And, that's just her personality. That's just who she is. It's why she's so dominant. And Beth is just the opposite of that. She was much softer. She was very right brained, artistic, much more feminine, all of that. And Hershel just has a lot of Beth in him. And of course, a lot of Glenn. So it was just really interesting to me. I feel like that was a parallel to show him being taught by her to use the knife. And it just, I should find pictures. I could very easily and line them up. And you'll see that they are even standing in the same formation, as Beth and Daryl were when he was teaching her the bow. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me. Then we have, when they go into his room, they do talk about a signal they had with the flashlight when he was little. And it came from him catching a lightning bug one day. It was just kind of a really sweet, reminiscent moment between them. But I do think that this is something of a theme, or it's going to be leading somewhere. So we'll have to watch for that. Keep in mind, this is episode 1 of the season, so they are setting things up here. I just don't know exactly where that's going to go. So then it switches over to Negan. He wakes up. He is in a cage. They have him eating cockroaches, which is disgusting. But we did have something interesting happen here. He basically asked his guard to play the violin for him, to play some music for him. And he didn't ask in so many words. He asked if, the coast was clear, and the guard just knew that meant he wanted him to play, and he did. He picked up his violin, and he started playing for him. This was just interesting. And, of course, I thought of Beth just because of the music aspect of it. But it also, I couldn't help but kind of start having headcanons about Beth singing for Negan. And I know people have had those kinds of headcanons since Negan showed up in season 7, so it's nothing new. But I just couldn't help but think of that. And, we had Carl singing You Are My Sunshine to Negan in season 7. So there's always been just a little tiny bit of a musical theme around Negan, and that's interesting. So I did like that they played that music for him, and, think of it this way. That was not necessary to the plot. It's not like we really, really needed that, or even Negan is the most musical character. We've seen, like I said, we've got a little bit of a theme around him because Carl sang to him, and we saw some other musical symbols during All Out War, but he's not musical in the same way Beth was, right? So it's not like he goes around singing all the time, or that he used to play the violin and that's why he wanted to hear it. It's nothing like that. This was not necessary. They could have cut this violin bit and it wouldn't have made any difference in the plot, which means they're putting it in there on purpose. So I'm kind of interested to see where that goes, if anywhere. The Croat comes to see him, and basically Negan is being stubborn and not doing what they want. So the Croat tells him they're going to have to escalate things, which is, all kinds of ominous and all that. We go back to Maggie and Hershel. Now, in the first scene, Maggie saw a moth, like a brown moth, and then she sees more of them here, and it's not clear right away what the symbolism of that is. Of course, we could talk about butterfly symbolism and cocoons and change, and we did see a butterfly drawn on the wall of the prison in chalk, but what this ends up leading to in the plot is it gives her a hint that they are running out of ethanol. So what happens is the new Babylon people show up, and they were in the first season. The governor is a woman, dark-haired woman, and then the marshal, who was in season 1, who tried to arrest Negan, they both show up, and they are conscripting people because they want to invade Manhattan, and he gives them this big speech about bringing Manhattan back, And Maggie, what I will say is that Maggie's very smart, and she does sniff out people's true motivations really well and really easily. So she knows right away that what they're actually trying to do is get their hands on the methane because they want it as a fuel source. So basically, this excursion, it's not the most moral thing in the world. I mean, of course, in a world like this, people are going to be fighting over power sources and resources all the time, but they're literally going into somebody else's territory that's very far away and that's being ruled by an enemy group, and they're going to try to take their power source by force and leave with it. It's not the most moral or stand-up thing they could do, right? And chances are it's not going to end well. But that is what they're trying to do. And so they're trying to conscript people to help them with this. Maggie fights with the marshal over it, but she says that she's willing to go as long as nobody else from her community that doesn't want to be conscripted is. So, like, she's saying, I'll go in place of anyone else, but that means if I'm going, you can't take anyone else. The marshal goes to his boss with that, right? And they're open to it, but they want Maggie to prove herself, to prove that she's worth taking her, you know, as one person over like 20 or 30. Then we go back to the Croat and Negan, and he takes Negan to Dama, which is the older lady. And again, they're just wanting him to do what they want, and at first he says no. But then they tell him that they have found his wife, Annie, and his child, Joshua, and that they're bringing them to Manhattan. Now, we don't know if this is true or not. They could be lying about this, but, you know, they also may not be, and he's not going to take chances. He's probably going to do what they want to protect his family. So they have something to hang over his head now and try to force him to do what they want. We do have, there was a line that I thought was kind of interesting that stuck out to me, but I don't know what it means yet. So there's a part where Hershel starts talking to one of the young men that have come with the New Babylonians in the conscription group. And this man is talking about New York and what it is and what it looks like. And Hershel tells him that he's wrong and that he's been there and that's not what it is. And Hershel ends up drawing him a picture of a bridge. And he tells him that this bridge is very twisted and broken and it started to fall, but then it sort of caught itself. So now it's all gnarled and twisted and everything. And he draws him this picture of it. And at one point, Hershel's looking at the bridge and he says, "It's better now than it ever was." And I'm not sure exactly what he means by that because they didn't qualify it. We don't know exactly what he was thinking when he said that or what he means by it. The thing that I first thought that it meant is almost like that Hershel prefers it that way as being twisted and broken. So it kind of reminds me of what Claimer Joe said to Daryl back in season 4. Daryl said something about the world falling apart, and Claimer Joe said, "Oh, I don't think it fell apart. I think it fell together. I think it's better this way." And I kind of thought that's maybe what Hershel was saying, that he just thought it was better with it being twisted like that. But I'm not sure if that's what he meant or not. But again, I think that was something they threw out there that they'll probably come back to, so it's another thing that I want to keep an eye on. Of course, the Croat makes Negan a new Lucille bat, right? Only this time it's kind of new and improved because it can shock people, and he will. They want him to perform, really, to put on a show, to bring people to their cause. And they go to Central Park, where there is a group, and they have walkers fighting in a ring in sort of a dogfight style, where they're betting and that sort of thing. So we see that. This is the new group that they're going to try to convince to help them and ally with them. And then we jump back to Maggie's assessment. The interesting thing here to me was the corral. So they wanted her to fight some walkers, and they literally had them inside a metal corral. And to me, that smacks of horse symbolism, and obviously we've seen a lot of horse symbolism. And especially because, I mean, sure, corrals can hold other things too. They can hold bulls and cows and things, but just because we've seen a lot of horse symbolism, that's what it reminded me of. And they went out of their way more than once to say the word corral. So it's like they really wanted to point it out to us. Anyway, so they want her to fight the walkers in the corral, and Ginny really wants to go, even though Maggie does not want her to. So they end up fighting together in the corral, and they will survive, of course. But Hershel is very angry that Maggie is going, and he believes that this is still about her obsession with Negan, which it might be. She denies it and says that it's not, but you can tell he's not convinced of that, and I'm not sure he should be. I think that even if Maggie truly doesn't believe she has an obsession with Negan, there could be a subconscious thing going on here. So I don't blame Hershel for being upset. He thought they had put this behind them, and they're getting closer, and things are getting better, and now she's leaving again, and I understand how that's frustrating, especially for a teenager. So then we get to the scene with Negan in the church. Now, this I mean, the first scene, like I said, it really reminded me of Daryl and Beth when she was learning the crossbow. But this scene with Negan in the church was probably the most significant and had the most symbolism in it. So, of course, Negan does his little song and dance. He gives his speech. And I, of course, noticed that there was a lot of Christian symbolism because they're in a church. So there's a cross right behind him. There's a great big picture painting of Christ, things you would expect to see in a church like this. And then he pulls out the marshal's badge, which is a sheriff's badge. It's a 5-pointed sheriff's badge. And this is one of those things that I just don't think we can get around. Like, people can point and say, oh, you're making that up, or you're making that too significant. But not only was Beth labeled the new sheriff in town, but in Still, when they first arrive at the Moonshine Shack, we see a 5-pointed sheriff star on the porch. Like, that's not about Rick. That's not about Michonne. That is about Daryl and Beth. So when Negan pulls out this Marshall's star, I couldn't help but side-eye at that. And I believe I said this last year, too, for season 1. The Marshall actually does have a lot of Beth symbolism around him as well. So just more of that. But here's the real kicker here. I probably would have mentioned the church either way. In fact, funny story, sort of funny story. Probably a week ago or more, 2 weeks ago at WD Way, found an article that kind of gave some insight into what was going to be in the first episode. It wasn't like anything super spoilery, but it was just like, oh, you might see this and we might see that. And this is like very generally like a synopsis of what you might see in the first episode. And it did mention that there would be a scene with Negan in the church, and that's pretty much all it said. And of course, we instantly pounce on that. Like, oh, what's going on in that church? Churches are very much a Beth thing, and we want to see what the symbolism is going to be there. So I probably would have mentioned this either way. But I was trying to decide exactly what they're trying to say symbolically about Negan here. If it were anyone else, I would probably say that he's being put forth as a Christ symbol, only because he's in front of the painting and the cross, and it just seems like because he's walking around in front of them and he's up at the front of the church almost as though he's the priest or the pastor or something. That's what I would say about most people. If it were Rick, if it were Aaron, if it were even Daryl, we might say something like that. But I'm not sure that's really what they're doing with Negan here. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think that he's being put forth as the Satan character. Now, I'm not saying by any means that Negan is being satanic, but he is deceiving people. He is literally putting on a show because that's what they told him to do. He's got the murder weapon again. No one's ever going to look at that bat and think it's anything other than a murder symbol, right? And he's wearing black. And of course, it's his signature Negan coat, but it's black and it's got the studs in it. And it, you know what I mean? It feels very fallen angel rather than angel. And on the other hand, you could also argue, though, that, like I said, I'm not saying he's being satanic other than the fact that he's practicing deception, which, okay, granted, that's very satanic. But he is doing this not because he wants to, but because he's hoping to protect his family. So he is being somewhat sacrificial, too. So it's very much, interesting to try and figure out which way they are going with it. But here's why I think that overall he represents a darker figure, symbolically. There's another man in the scene who very much pushes back against Negan. He does not want to put aside his differences. He does not want to follow Negan, and he's very rebellious about that. He stands up and says, well, what if I don't want to follow you? And, has no fear about saying that. But before he actually stands up, he starts singing a refrain of Kumbaya. And then Negan actually repeats, he doesn't sing it or repeat all of the lyrics, but he says Kumbaya right after that. He says, okay, I'm not looking for Kumbaya, this is what I'm looking for. And I immediately felt like that was on purpose. There's some reason they're putting Kumbaya in here. Before we get to Kumbaya, though, let's talk about what happens. This man rebels and says, I'm not going to do what you want. And then Negan puts the bat near him, and this is the guy that ends up getting shocked, right? He gets shocked, he hits the ground pretty hard, and he's out. So he doesn't die. Actually, afterward, at the end of the scene, we see that two of his buddies picked him up, and he's awake, and he's walking out. He's just a little bit hurt from the shock. So you could actually see that as a resurrection sequence, like he gets shocked, and it looks, anyway, like he's dead because he's out, but then he gets back up and walks out. So you can see that that kind of is a symbolic resurrection. But to make it even better, this man's name is Christos. And if you look at the subtitles, they spell it Christos. So I was just thinking that if they had changed the spelling to be more like the name Chris, like Christos, or even like with a K, then that would be them kind of steering away from the Christian symbolism, but they don't. They left the H in, so the name of Christ is actually in this man's name. And Christos in Greek means the same thing. It means Christ, it means anointed one, so it's like a name for Christ in a different language. So this man is the Christ figure, very, very obviously, right? So then I looked up kumbaya. I mean, we're all pretty familiar with it, but I was going, okay, what does that actually mean? I don't know what it means. And this is what Google AI overview told me. Kumbaya originally meant come by here in a Creole language spoken by African Americans in the U.S. Sea Islands. It was the refrain of a spiritual song, and the lyrics often included, quote, someone's crying, my lord, unquote, implying a plea for God's presence and comfort. So even though this guy was being a little bit flippant, like he was being sarcastic about singing Kumbaya, this is still a very religious song that pleas for God's presence, and it's being sung in a church by a man named Christos. This is not an accident. They could have named him anything else, right? They are putting this together on purpose. And then it says, over time, the song and the term kumbaya have come to represent a naive, idealistic, and sometimes even derogatory sense of unity and togetherness. And that really caught my eye because, think about it this way. This man was being rebellious against someone that he sees as a devil. He says, no, I'm not going to do what you want. He stands up to him, and his name is Christos. So you could say that he was maybe being naive about what Negan can do and what this group is going to do to him if he rebels. And he's being maybe idealistic, thinking he can stand up like this, and then something hits him, in this case an electric shock, and he hits the ground. But he's not dead. He gets up later and walks away. High level, that sounds a lot like what happened with Beth and Coda. She was maybe practicing a little bit of hubris when she stabbed Dawn, maybe being a little bit naive and a little bit idealistic, but she was rebelling. She was standing up to someone that she thought was evil, that was doing something she didn't like by trying to keep Noah there. Something hit her, a bullet in that case, and she hit the ground, but we don't believe she died. We believe she walked away from that. You see what I mean? I do believe that this is a parallel sequence to Coda. It's fairly subtle to those who don't know the signs. Like, I think Christos is pretty on the nose. Like, that's not subtle, but to anyone who's not looking for this sort of thing, other than TD, they're not going to see it, right? They're not thinking that this has anything to do with Beth. And it doesn't in the plot, but symbolically, I do believe it's a mirror sequence. So, like I said, there was the thing at the beginning that seemed like when Daryl was teaching her the crossbow, but this was really the biggest thing that jumped out at me, because we have this sequence, and it's all happening in a church. It's all happening with Negan, and this is why I think if this guy is the Christ figure, then Negan is not the Christ figure. He's sort of the devil that the Christ figure is standing up to. So in this case, I guess he would represent Dawn, or possibly even the person who shot Beth, and we don't really know who that is yet. So really interesting to think about. But I really liked that sequence. And then what happens? We go back to Maggie. Ginny and Hershel both want to go with her. She can't keep Ginny from going because she isn't technically Ginny's mother, but she tells Hershel he can't go. And then there's the sequence where she talks about her mother and about the fact that she never knew her mother. Now, I'm probably going to get questions about this because I get a lot of questions about the timeline and Maggie versus Beth's age. I don't think that this changed anything. She said that she didn't know her mother very well or for very long. We do know that Maggie's mother, I believe, died when she was young. So I think that's what she meant by that. I don't know the actual age We would have to look it up and see if it's in the Walking Dead wiki. But it's something like, and understand that I'm making up these numbers, I'm making up these numbers just for the hypothetical, but maybe Maggie's mother died when she was like 8 or something, and then Hershel remarried a few years later, and then him and his second wife had Beth, that sort of thing. So when she said I didn't know her well or for long, I think it's just because her mother died when she was very young. And then she was very rebellious, and she said by the time I made things right with my dad, I was already an adult. So it's kind of an interesting throwback to Hershel and, kind of how things were in season 2 of The Walking Dead. But it was a really good way for her to connect with Hershel Jr. and just say, this is why I want to be a good parent to you, and I want us to have a good relationship. And let's try to keep that. I'm going to go to the city, but I will be right back. I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to be gone long. I'm just doing this because I have to. And so then at the end, Maggie and Jenny leave with New Babylon and are heading toward Manhattan again. And Hershel does stay behind, but he waves. But we also see him throwing the knife again, and where he wasn't really sticking it before, it would like hit the wall or, the deer or whatever and bounce off. We do see him finally stick it. So he's getting better at his skills. And, you get the sense that he's probably not going to stay put. I'm assuming that he's going to follow Maggie at some point. We see kind of images of Negan walking around with the bat, dragging the bat around, that are a little bit ominous. And then we also see that Donna has a mouse in a maze, which is interesting, and definitely a symbol. I mean, who's the mouse in the maze? Is it Negan? It might be. Is it Maggie? Maybe it's both. I mean, that's definitely a symbol and a foreshadow that she has people running around like rats in mazes. And I mean, this is not good. She's very manipulative, and she's kind of a puppet master. So definitely an ominous foreshadowing there. I think that's pretty much it. She says something to the mouse or the rat, whatever it is, about, she says, I guess you won't be eating today, but don't worry, it won't be long, you'll get there. And as it's, it's kind of a voiceover, and it's showing Hershel when she says that. So it kind of ends on a note of potential for the rest of the season. I watched the episode Insider. Nothing really big jumped out at me. They mostly talked about how strained Maggie and Hershel's relationship is, but that it had gotten better as they come into season 2, but very quickly things start to unravel because he's angry at her for leaving. But there wasn't like anything that really jumped out at me that was TD about the episode Insider. It was just them talking about what happened in the episode. So yeah, that's about what I have for this episode. I did enjoy watching it, and I'm excited to see what comes on this season. And, I think that's where I'm going to end it for today. I will try to get another video and ask video out by the end of the week, like I said. Thank you for being patient with me, and I promise I will get you more. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the first episode of Dead City, and let me know what you thought about it and what questions you have, and I will do my best to answer them, okay? Talk soon.